All right, and I think we're ready to get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is John Zilch. I'm part of the Dun & Bradstreet product team. We've got a very exciting release to the Workbench product that's set to go out tonight, and just really excited to share some of those features with you and let you know what we've been up to. So thanks for joining us. I'm actually joined today by members of our marketing and customer success team. I have Cindy Lyons here with us.
Thanks, John.
And
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Cindy. And Ronak Amin from the customer success team as well. Thanks for joining, folks. And I thought it would make a far better webinar for them to share some of their stories around what they're seeing and working with a lot of you, right, our customers. So again, can't thank you enough for joining us. And with that, we can dive right into the presentation. So we're here today to talk about a Workbench release. This release is really geared around email verification, which is a big part of what we do here with the product. Our customers love it. It's a way for us to learn things about the data that's flowing through Workbench. And I thought it makes sense to just start with why we do this in general and what value it provides. And Cindy, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing some of your learnings that you've seen through the years.
Sure. Thanks, John. I mean, the reality is probably the reason why almost everyone on this call does business with Dun & Bradstreet Workbench is you want the very best contacts available. So as you go to engage in your marketing campaigns, you're really looking for the very best performance possible, and that's only done through accurate emails and complete information. So as you go into your marketing automation systems, you rely on them to make sure that you're going to hit the metrics and the goals that you're hoping to achieve, but more importantly, even your managers expect out of you and your department. So if your contacts aren't any good, your campaign performance is not going to be any good. And at the end of the day, you see the stat here that 70% of marketers are unhappy or only marginally happy with the ROI of, say, their Marketo or their Eloquas. The reality is it's not the technology, it really is the data and the context that you put in there. Bad data in is going to be bad results out. With these marketing automation systems comes a cost. You spend a lot of money to actually have that technology and efficiency at your fingertips, but you also pay, by the record, by the volume of the records that platform is managing for you. So if you don't have good data in there, you're still paying for that bad data. So not only do you not want to use it for your campaigns, you definitely just don't want to even have it in there because it's going to impact your cost to utilize that platform. A third reason, of course, there's a whole lot more than three, but we're just going to mention three this afternoon, is you send a reputation. The reality is that if you continue to use bad emails, bad information, you're going to get flagged and you're going to get blacklisted and you're going to get on these spam lists. And on top of, again, it's going to impact your results. At the end of the day, your Marketo and your Eloqua platform may refuse to do business with you. So there really is a lot of risk to using contact data, email addresses that are not valid and good.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Cindy. That really helps kind of set the table as to why this is important and why we're investing a lot in the technology that we have within Workbench to validate contacts in a better way. I think another element of this, just to set the table a little bit, is to talk about how it works. Many of you know the process as it is today, but I think it was worth spending a couple minutes as to how the process works for those of you who don't know as much or are new to the tool. And with that, no one works with this process and our customers as much as Ronak. So Ronak, if you wouldn't mind just kind of walking through this a little bit for us.
Sure. Thanks, John, and thanks for many of my customers that are on the line. But on a high level, for those that do have access to what we call a data management subscription, the process as a whole doesn't change. More so that the way we present the data is changing, right? But for the folks that are on the line that haven't subscribed to a data management package, the first step is essentially exporting that data and providing it to us, right? And that could be in the form of a Marketo, Eloqua, Salesforce, or a CRM export, as well as a homegrown system or a database that's managed internally, right? What we ask from the customer is an export that includes primarily things like an email address, but other firmographic or demographic information that you have that may get enriched as part of the subscription. The second step to that is uploading it into our cloud-based platform we call Workbench, right? Within Workbench, you can kick off what we call a data optimizer project, right? Now, what this project does, and what we're spending a majority of the time talking about today, is email validation, right? So we go through each one of the emails that you provide to us, and we validate those emails live that week. And we'll dive a little deeper into the actual dispositions and the data that we provide. But on a high level, we're essentially telling you the quality of the emails that you've provided to us via Workbench. The next step, and the last and final one, is preparing that final export. Right? Together with the tool as well as your support team, we're going to provide you back a file that you can successfully upload as an update back into that marketing automation or that CRM platform, allowing you to empower your sales and marketing campaigns. And the one highlight that I want to make, and the reason why I highly recommend a lot of our customers adopt a subscription model to this, and this is based on a fact of serious decisions, that roughly 3 to 5% of your data is going to decay every month. And this is just based on folks either leaving a company or a company changing. But these are records that you want to identify, right? And for those reasons that Cindy previously mentioned.
Great. So thank you, Ronak. That was helpful. We'll hear from you in a second once we kind of go through the what of what we did for this release as to how we can implement the changes to drive more success. So thank you for that. I also want to take a step back. I forgot to mention this at the start. If you have any questions whatsoever as we go through this, please post them into the question area within the panel here, our module for GoToWebinar. We'll check those at the end, but we're going to go through a lot of different features that we've added and pieces to the email verification tool. So if you have any questions whatsoever, throw them out there, and we'll try to get to them at the end. Thanks for that. So we talked about why it's important. We talked about how it works within Workbench. So why did we have to make any changes at all? So we've been doing this for a couple of years, and what we found was our customers wanted more information. They wanted to make decisions based on the data, right? That's why Dun & Bradstreet exists. Is we have really good data around all sorts of different things, right? But in this case, how an email performs. Will it reach an intended inbox? And we had a lot of that. We kind of harnessed ourselves. We wanted to just expose that to our customers and through the product so you can make better decisions based on better data. We spent a lot of time kind of going through, how to do that, and we'll get to that in a second. But that was probably the number one thing is let's add some clarity to the data you're seeing around email verification. And again, just to empower you, the customer, with that data and, be able to devise a strategy based on it. So those were, two of our major goals, and then to make it actionable, of course, as well, and to make it as clear as possible so that we're not just throwing a bunch of numbers and scores at you, but you can actually get a qualitative idea of what this data means to you and what it's going to mean for your marketing success. So again, we had a lot of the data. We just wanted to make it available to you. And with that, we can start to get into what's new in this Workbench release. I think there's 3 major things that we did and that you'll see starting tomorrow, again, after the release. And the first is around email deliverability rating. So for those of you who are familiar with our current process, and as it's been for a couple of years, we give back a yes or no around the email deliverability. And what we wanted to do was start to break that out and get more granular. So again, you could get a better idea of the grade behind those, behind each email record that you're sending through to us. So we kind of transitioned away from this pass-fail, yes or no type of model that we had and tried to break it down into what will end up being a 5-point rating system of the email. And we'll show you what those are in a second. Second one is those ratings are based on a score, right? So we've got a data science team here at Dun & Bradstreet who have scored different emails based on the results we get back from our process. And those scores are something that we had in-house, and we said, nope, let's pass those through, right through the product and to our customer. So those scores will be available as well with this release, and that's the part that I think we're probably most excited about, is just to give you the probability of an email actually delivering or not. And then the email disposition in the past, we had kind of bucketed them almost too much to the point that they were a little generic, like good or bad or something like that around email disposition, which we asked you, and the feedback we were getting was, this is a little bit too generic. I'd like to know a little bit more around the email. Did it hit the mailbox? Was it a catch-all? Did it fail to find the email server? What was the actual response that we got. And we think we've nailed that in terms of giving you a better set of dispositions to work from. So those are the three major things that we've done. So what are they, right? So let's go a level deeper on that first one, the email deliverability rating. As I mentioned before, the current state, right? So if you got something back today from our service, it would say yes, no, or unknown, and a large portion being unknown. We tried to break that out. And if you think of it as a letter grade almost, right, from school, we have excellent, right? So anything that's kind of at that A level, and then going down from there to a good, to a fair, to a poor, and to a very poor, so that you can make decisions based on each of those levels. And then we also put email threat risks in there as well, because we feel like that's a rating in itself, quite frankly, and speaks to the nature of that email and how you should treat it. Okay, so I'm going to go through these pretty quick, but again, I encourage you to ask questions if anything here is unclear. We'd love to get into it a little bit more. Email deliverability score, as I mentioned, this is a 0 to 99 probability that an email is going to deliver or not. So when you see one that's in single digits, really good chance that that email is not going to deliver, and that contact, at least from the email perspective, is bad and should be treated as such. So kind of runs the gamut. From the 0 to 99s, and those are aligned to the deliverability ratings, right? So if you don't want to base it on score, if you don't want to make decisions based on the precise scoring, then you can actually use the ratings, which are going to tie to the scores. So for a rating of excellent, you're going to get a score of 90 to 99, good 80 to 89, so on and so forth down the list here, until you get to the very poors, which have a 0 to 20% chance of actually reaching their intended audience. So, there's an example here on the slide, right? If you got an email back through our process that had a score of a 16, well, that has a 16% chance of reaching the intended audience, or that inbox.
And John, if you don't mind, let me jump in here and give a little bit more detail on where these numbers come from, right? And I know there's some folks on the call that haven't gone through an email validation process with us, right? So what we're doing in an example, let's say, in the file that you upload to Workbench, you have my email, right? rmean@netprospects.com or at dunnandbradstreet.com. What we're doing is we're pinging that email server and getting a response from that server, right? So what we're not doing is sending an actual email to me. We're pinging that, and the analogy that I like to describe is we're knocking on that server's door and saying, hey, is rmean@dnb.com available to receive an email if I were to send it to them, right? Now that doorman of the server will give us a few different responses, right? And in this analogy, the doorman is essentially how that IT department has set up that email server, right? And there may be certain rules or firewalls or boundaries that that IT department has put in. But on a high level, we'll get various responses from that server, right? For example, we may get something like successful delivery, right? And that's an indication that that email is successful. If we were to decide to send an email that day, there's a 90+% chance that that's going to go through, right? On the opposite, right, the server may say, no, unsuccessful delivery. Right. In that particular example, there's going to be a very low % chance of that email delivery. Now, the way we get these actual scores is for each one of those responses that the server gives us, on a routine basis, we actually take sample data and send emails to them. Right? Not our customers' data, but our own, and we measure that. Right? So we'll say a sample of 10,000 that fall within the successful delivery response bucket, and we'll send out emails. Right? And in that particular example, we'll see something like a 98%. Right? 98% of the emails that we sent to ones that came back with that response delivered. Right? And that's where we're coming with these scores. Right? So like John mentioned, these scores can be viewed as a probability of that particular email delivery.
Yeah, that's great, Ronak. Thanks for that, because a lot of folks, some of which are on this call, ask us about the science behind the data, and it comes up a lot. And I think it's really cool how we do it, and it's very effective. So thanks, and I'm guessing you'll kind of get back into that when you talk about how to implement it for success. So good lead into that. I believe this is the last. Oh, no, there's a sample, but the last of the three things that we're looking to do for this release, again, is change the disposition. And again, try to add a little more color around what happened with that email. And Ronak spoke about this, right? So these dispositions are actually what leads us to the scoring. Now, not all dispositions will have the same scoring based on how we pinged it and the time frame and everything else, but you'll see they're in the same ballpark, and it does help us with that science of saying, okay, with this disposition, you know, what kind of score do we get back? And this is what you're seeing here, bulleted are the new dispositions that we've kind of moved to. I don't have the current ones, but they had, again, very generic labeling like yes or no. Now we've got successful delivery, catch-all, SMTP issue, DNS issue, IP block, email threat risk again, and then other if it's something that's more miscellaneous and doesn't fit into one of the other buckets. So we're not showing you the product on this webinar because, as Ronak mentioned toward the beginning, the workflow, everything you're doing today to use Workbench and get this data back, nothing changes there, but the data itself, right, so the deliverable. And that's why here we're showing you kind of just a sample file of what you can expect having run a cleanse and enrich or a contact optimizer. And we just, you know, we threw some dummy data out here, but gave you an idea of kind of how it could break out between was the email a duplicate, was there any threat risks within this group, you know, so that gets its own label as well as being a rating and a disposition. And then, of course, what's the score, right? So what's the score behind each of these emails? And you can see some are very low on the 5 side and therefore have a rating of very poor, and others are on the higher side with a 93, and then, of course, there's others that are in the middle. But this should give you, again, a little more, a couple levels deeper of detail than what we had done previously to help drive those decisions. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ronak around, you know, how do you drive those decisions? How can the data help achieve what you're looking for on the marketing side?
Yeah, thanks, John. And I'm sure many of you are wondering, how am I actually going to use this data, right? And what it comes down to is, you know, in junction with our tool, our support team, and either myself or a member of our customer success team, we're going to work with you to learn a little bit more about your email practices and what sort of things you've faced in the past, right? And based on those answers or those decisions are going to dictate what sort of best practices we recommend, right? So for example, if you're in a situation where you have experienced issues of a bad sender reputation, your marketing automation team has attempted to slap you on the wrist for having a high bounce rate, or even worse, you've hit something like a spam trap and you've had those issues in the past. For folks that are in that boat, we're going to recommend that you stick to the excellence and the goods, right? Keeping you at an average of 80 or above in terms of email deliverability, right? Now, with any other data solution, right, whether it's net new or managing your own data, there's going to be a balance, right? We can open that up into and include some of the fares, and that'll allow you to market and target more customers. But using that accuracy score, we're going to be able to assess preemptively what sort of deliverability you're going to see prior to hitting send on a campaign, right? So for example, using that field that John just mentioned, email score, we can calculate what we suggest the actual deliverability is going to be on a particular campaign, right? So we take the average of those numbers, and if it's something around 75%, we may recommend that we go ahead and remove some of those fares and either backfill them with goods or just simply remove them to increase that average deliverability. And what we see based on our tests in that actual sending environment, you should see roughly 1 to 2% of a difference from that average score after sending it. Obviously, there is other factors like your sender reputation and your IP score that may play a factor, but what it will do is prior to any campaign give you a good understanding of what the deliverability will and should be after it's complete. But like I mentioned, our customer success team is going to work with you in a very consultative manner to learn more about how you're using the data, what have you seen in the past in terms of bad or good experiences, and that's going to dictate what we recommend in terms of what level out of that 5-point ranking to use for your programs and your campaigns. We're going to then come back and make sure that that aligns to what we expect. Right? So after a campaign is done, we'll work together with you, whether it's a Marketo export or just an email deliverability report, to make sure that aligns with what we expected, and if there is any issues, to dig a little bit deeper and figure out why, particularly in your environment, we're seeing either better or worse results.
Great, thanks, Ronak. Yeah, and, I'm going to ask you a question if that's okay,
Sure.
Although I didn't forewarn you. You've got the, I asked you to do the webinar, then I don't tell you that I'm going to put you on the spot. You've got a home run strategy you've implemented here at D&B. I know that's evolved through the years. does this play a part? And it's going to sound like a planted question, but I truly don't know. And a lot of it is the match and append of data too. But is this ever a part of your home run strategy?
It definitely is, right? And we can take two different approaches, right? The conservative approach, and we can be, exclude everything. But what we want to make sure at the end of the day is our customers are seeing value, but even more important, that they're actually making revenue and generating business from the data that we're managing, right? So right off the bat, things that are in that very poor level, we're going to highly recommend that you do not email to. Same goes for things like email threat risks, right? And those on the phone that haven't, heard that term or used to that term, that's pertaining to things like spam traps, right? Right off the bat, best practice, we're going to recommend that you pull those out. But then we're going to use a balancing system to figure out where and what sort of records that we can use for you to hit both, to maintain, cost efficiency as well as send your reputation, like Cindy mentioned. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you have enough data to be able to, promote your products and solutions. And if there is a gap, whether that be because there's a large portion of undeliverable records, the great part of the Workbench solution is we do have other products within there that allow you to grow your database, whether that's based on specific accounts or criteria.
Awesome. Thank you. And that is our last slide. Now we've got the questions, comments slide. I've seen several questions have already come in, so thank you so much for putting those in. We're gonna get to those in a second, but I'd be remiss not to ask if you've ever got feedback, comments, questions for us. We're always happy to help here. All three of us, Cindy, Ronak, myself, are listed here along with our emails. We love hearing from you, and you help really build the product into a better product with your feedback. So thanks for that. And feel free to always reach out. So now I'm just going to kind of start looking through the questions here and see if there's anything we can answer right off the top. But again, I encourage you to put in more as we're going through these. So there are some questions here. I see a common thread around the email threat risk. So Aaron had asked, can we just explain what it is?
Yeah, and I think I just mentioned it, but I'll repeat it again. Email threat risk is separate from deliverability, right? And it's an indication that this email is of risk, right? Predominantly because it's a potential spam trap. So we do use a series of our partners that identify these risky emails, and we'll flag these for you, right? These are records that we highly recommend not emailing unless you have a very, very strong relationship with that person. But on a high end, let's say you have a list of your top customers. These are people that are opted in, that have a strong relationship with you, that spend a lot of money with you. These are folks in your particular case, if you'd like to continue emailing them, feel free. Our recommendation is to be careful of them, right? On the opposite side of that story, if you have a list that's coming from an event, these are customers that you don't know, you just purchased the registration list. Cold records that you don't have a relationship with, we highly recommend not emailing them if they fall within that email threat risk category.
Yeah, I had another just kind of general question. Can you get this presentation after today? I imagine we'd be able to send it out. I'm trying to think. We might pass it through a couple of different folks to see if there's anything proprietary in here, but
no, I don't think there is.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll actually send it out to everyone who attended.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Cindy. I was hoping you'd take that one because I didn't know the answer. And then Jeff had a great question. He's asking, Workbench has another side to it, which is selling net new contacts to help with account-based marketing or just, for a campaign you might be running, and how this ties into that. And it's a great question because our contacts that we have in D&B go through the exact same email verification process that we talked about today. So it's, there's definitely consistency there, and the scores that you're getting on your contacts and your leads are the same scoring. It's the same scoring model and same process that we talked about, same science behind what we're doing to our own data. And then Jeff had asked, okay, if we purchase a contact from you, then we find that it's undeliverable, is there a refund policy there? And I know there is. I'm not sure exactly how many days it is and what the terms are. I would check with your rep on that. But there's definitely a refund policy where if we find that record to be undeliverable,
yeah, and I can
give you credit.
Give a quick explanation on that, but feel free to email me, folks, if you have more questions on Target. But on a high level, with the Target subscription, if you purchase and download a record from us, every 60 days we're going to revalidate that list that you've taken. We'll alert you and let you know, which of the records that you did pull from the Target piece have gone bad. The system will automatically recredit your account. and you can then go in and update your system with a report file that will regenerate for you, and then hopefully use the target tool to find new replacement records for those.
Yeah, and then James is asking in the past if you had flagged a contact as undeliverable, what was your threshold? It's changed over time, and hopefully that has been communicated. I think most recently it was at a 40 or below.
Mm-hmm.
So the poor and very poor would be the new ratings to be consistent with what we do today. But again, this is exactly, James, thanks for that question, because that's exactly what we're trying to do here is leave it up to you to say, if it's a 20 to 40% chance of delivering, I actually want to leave that in my database. I only want to get rid of the very poor. Maybe I at least want to start there. Now it's up to you to make that decision along with the help of your rep and our support team. We can lend a hand, but you'll have that data to base your decisions on. So that's great. Okay, Michelle is asking about chronic complainers being flagged as an email threat risk. Is this data available so we can differentiate between real threats versus complainers? Ronak's shaking his head.
That's a really good question.
Yeah. I don't think so. At least I can dig in a little bit more, but from what we've been told, our email threat risk is just one kind of binary flag that we're working off of, unfortunately. So there's no way to go a level deeper or drill in there.
Yeah, and for the person that did ask that question, I will ask a favor. If you could email me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this proposal. Would you rather email threat risk only be limited to the potential spam traps and the folks that fall within the chronic complainer bucket now be counted as an email threat risk? I'd love to hear your opinion on that if you wouldn't mind emailing me.
Yeah, and Ali had a good question too. Is there some kind of solution to the problem where you ping someone's email and you get the, hey, this person's left the company? I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, so that's a challenging one. So in terms of the system of pinging servers, we're essentially asking, is that email active right now? It's very common, especially with the C-level suite, for if a CEO were to leave the company, for that email to remain active for another year or two and have maybe some sort of automated response or some sort of forwarding mechanism in there. So on our end, unfortunately, we're limited to just those dispositions that reflect the deliverability of that email. However, I have heard that many popular marketing automation systems allow you to establish rules, right? For example, where if you get a soft bounce from one particular record more than 3 times, then that record now goes into an undeliverable bucket. But what I would recommend is work with your marketing automation provider or your ESP to see if that's something that's available to you.
Okay, and I know we've crossed the 2:30 line here, and some folks are dropping off for other meetings. Let us do kind of a lightning round here and try to get to what we can. How do your tools allow customers to grow their databases? Brianna asked that awesome question. Almost so good it almost sounds like a planted question. I promise you it's not. There's another side to Workbench called the target module, and a lot of the use cases that we see our customers run the optimizer process, or cleanse and enrich, the thing we've been talking about today. They get a bunch of emails that have gone bad. They figure out which companies those emails are from, and then they use Target to replenish them. So the CMO at Acme Co. may have left the company or is no longer, their email is no longer good. I'm going to go over to Target and find the new CMO for that same company because, again, with the account-based marketing strategy and everything else, I don't want to lose my engagement or my relationship to that organization. So Target is the answer to grow, but it can be used in conjunction with what we're talking about today.
Awesome. Looks like we got a question from Jim regarding, can these scores be added back to the data that I've already pulled from Workbench? So if you have an active data management subscription, you have that ability to run your database through 6 times over the course of the year. So I highly recommend after tonight's release, you do your next round of data management. And you will get these new fields, and I highly recommend taking those and replacing them with the fields that we've historically provided.
Yeah, and Jim, if you were mentioning a net new record, if you could get a score on that, or in America asked the same question, how do I get a score back for something I purchased net new? We don't have that today built into the product, so you don't get that score back. But every, unless there's something, special arrangement made, 99% of our accounts in Workbench are 90 or above for the contacts that we sell. So you have the right to say, no, I want less than that. I want to bring it down to a 40 and above. But not many folks have done that. Not many customers have done that. So anything you're seeing in Target has a 90 or above, which for that reason, it didn't make a whole lot of sense for us to give back the score because you kind of knew what it was going to be. All right. And I think we've got, that's it. Oh, we've got a couple people saying thank you. Well, thank you. You know, you're welcome. We love doing this stuff, so it didn't feel like anything we wish we could do it more often. Again, I'd encourage you to reach out to us and drop us a line, comments, questions, feedback. Thanks for being great customers. Cindy, Ronak, anything else?
Yeah.
No, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much, folks.